Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Today, we're going to be reading a biography. I'll show you. It's called The Youngest Marcher, the story of Audrey Faye Hendricks, a young civil rights activist. Remember, the civil rights movement is when we're thinking about equal rights for people of color. The Youngest Marcher, the story of Audrey Faye Hendricks, a young civil rights activist. The book is written by Cynthia Levinson and illustrated by Vanessa Brantley-Newton, and it's published by Atheneum Books for young readers. I hope you like it. Whenever Mike flew into town, Audrey and her mama cooked. Barbecued ribs, stewed greens, sweet potato souffle, and Audrey's favorite, hot rolls baptized in butter. Other folks knew Mike as Martin or Dr. King. The Hendrickses knew his nickname. They did the same with other ministers too, like Fred Shuttlesworth and Jim Bevel. After Mike blessed the feast, Mama expected Audrey to keep still during supper. But when grown-ups talked about wiping out the segregation laws that kept black and white people apart in Birmingham, she just had to speak up. Audrey intended to go places and do things like anybody else. I want to eat ice cream inside Newberry's. I want to sit downstairs at the Alabama. I don't want hand-me-down school books. But stools at the counter, plush movie theater seats, books so fresh they'd crackle when you open them, those were for white children. Hush, hissed Mama. 90-year-old children should not speak in front of company, especially ministers like Mike, Fred, and Jim, who were bringing dreams of justice. I can imagine if I were her, I also would want those things. Go into any ice cream parlor, sit in any seat at the movie theater, not only get used books, but get brand new ones too at school. Audrey knew all about segregation. She knew to pay the driver at the front of the bus and then step off and walk all the way around to the back door. Drink from the fountain with a dirty bowl and warm water. Use the freight elevator at department stores downtown. Front row seats, cool water, elevators with white-gloved operators laws said that, Front row seats, cool water, elevators with white-gloved operators. Laws said those were for white folks. Every Monday night, Audrey and her mama and daddy, and her aunts, uncles, cousins joined neighbors and friends at Fred's church for worship, fellowship, and testimony. They sang and swayed along with the movement choir. Her voice spirited and spiritual. Black and white together, we shall overcome. For once, she didn't have to keep still. Looks like she's enjoying herself. Then came testimonies. White store owners won't hire me. Ku Kluxers chased me. Policemen called me names. The hateful stories made Audrey squirm. She tried to tell her mama, that's not right. Shh! How could Mama expect her to hush? She had to make things right. But what could she do? You see, they're not allowing him to go in because he's black. Here, these are people that were really bad and they did not like African Americans and they didn't treat them well. And we can see here that even the police officers are mistreating this woman. It's not fair. When Mike visited Fred's church, thousands of people crowded around her to hear him preach. In a voice as taut as steel cables, as smooth as glass, he intoned, "Segregation is morally wrong and sinful. That's true." Fired up, Audrey sat taller. "An unjust law is no law at all," he proclaimed. Audrey had witnessed Mike explain his plan at her supper table and knew what he meant. If a law was unjust, disobey it. Sit down inside of Newberry's. Picket those white stores. March to protest those unfair laws. Why, even marching was against the law. Then get arrested. Fill the jails, Mike explained. Fill Birmingham's jails. So full that policemen can't squeeze in one more person. Pack cells so tight that police will have to quit arresting people for demanding their rights. And remember, Mike is Martin Luther King. Audrey just knew Mike's plan would work. She twisted in her pew to see which grown-ups would walk down the aisle, volunteer for jail. But they mostly stayed put, eyes staring at their feet, hands on their knees. Feet, hands, and knees didn't move. I'd imagine because they're scared to go to jail, right? As anyone would be. Fill the jails, Mike pleaded, meeting after meeting. But heads shook. All around her, Audrey heard, "No, best not break those segregation laws. Boss man will fire me. Landlord will evict me. Policeman will beat me." If nobody protested, Mike's plan would fail. Police keep arresting anyone anytime. For anything, forever. Audrey would never be able to go to places and do things like everybody else. One night, Jim announced a new idea. If grown-ups won't do it, we'll fill the jails with children. Audrey leaped to her feet. "I want to go to jail," she declared. Mama looked deep and saw that Audrey's eyes begged. "Please." "Okay," Mama said. Audrey strutted down that aisle. She was going to jail. So remember, the reason she volunteers to go is because the grown-ups can't go. The reason the grown-ups can't go is because they might lose their job or they'll be evicted from their home or apartment. That means they'll be kicked out. 2 mornings later, she put on a fresh pressed pinafore and shiny Mary Janes, but turned down socks. Protesters got to look nice. In the meantime, her daddy bought her a game to help her pass time in jail. Her mama and daddy took her by Center Street Elementary to tell her teacher she'd be absent, maybe for a whole week. Miss Wills wrapped her arms around her. Audrey knew she was proud of her. She said goodbye to her grandparents. "You'll be fine," her grandmother said. She knew Audrey would be brave. So did Audrey. Then her mama and daddy drove her to 16th Street Baptist Church, where the children were gathering. Even before she reached the door, Audrey heard loud voices chanting freedom songs. You can see that there are other kids there with her too. Some of them might look a little older, but they're still kids. Inside, hundreds of big kids called out to friends and crowded around signs for their high schools. Parker, Carver, her head swiveled. Where was the sign for Center Street Elementary? She was the only protester from her school, the youngest child in the whole church, and she knew no one. Audrey huddled by her parents in the basement. You can read these signs. It says, "Justice for all. Segregation is sin or bad." But when Jim lined her up with the others 2 by 2 and the doors swung open, Audrey straightened up. She was going to break a law and go to jail to help make things right. Clutching a protest sign in the hand and her game in the other, Audrey marched out the door. She stomped and sang, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me around." Half a block from the church, a white policeman stopped Audrey. He pointed toward a police van. "Sentence 1 week in juvenile hall." Juvenile hall is jail for younger people, or like teenagers, or in this case, kids. A matron locked Audrey in a day room with 24 other girls, all older, all bigger, all strangers. Audrey sat alone and slipped the cover off her game. "I told you, sit down," the matron yelled. Audrey jumped. She didn't remember standing. The matron dragged her to a dark, empty room. "When I tell you something, you do it," she commanded, or I'll leave you here. Trembling, Audrey quietly followed the matron back to the day room, put away her game, lay down her head, and cried. Jail was harder than she thought, and she wasn't fine after all. By evening, Audrey was hungry and tired. For dinner, soupy, oily, tasteless grits. At night, a bare mattress with one thin sheet for a cover. The next morning, no fresh underwear, no clean pinafore or her outfit, no toothbrush. Audrey and her cellmates were let outdoors into an empty concrete pen surrounded by high prison walls. The older girls talked together. Audrey wondered what her classmates were doing. Miss Wills would be keeping them busy. Seems like she misses school. On another day, Audrey was sent to a huge room and told to sit in a chair that was so high her feet dangled above the floor. 4 white men glared at her. She'd never talked to a white man before. "Are you against America?" one demanded to know. No, sir, she answered politely. "What do you talk about at those meetings?" another asked. "Our freedom." "Why do you march?" "To go places and do things like anybody else." What was wrong with that? Every mealtime, Audrey stared at greasy grits. She could barely spoon them into her mouth, let alone swallow them. Every night, the cot's wire springs jabbed. Every morning, she had nothing to do but sit alone with her game. In the afternoons, though, more kids crowded into the day room. Some days, many of them arrived sopping wet. A girl explained that firemen aimed powerful hoses at the children. Surging water spun them off their feet and down the street. They got up and kept marching anyway, until they too were sent to jail. By Audrey's 5th day in detention, the police couldn't squeeze in one more person. "We filled up all the rooms! We filled up all the rooms!" Audrey practically jumped up and down. She was so proud. Watching television in the day room, she saw Black people stroll straight into stores and restaurants like they belonged there. No one else could be sent to jail. Everything changed. After 7 days, Audrey went home. Her mama and daddy wrapped their arms tight around her, washed the jail off her, and for dinner, hot rolls baptized in butter. So she spent a whole week in jail. And remember, the purpose was that she is trying to get equal rights for all African Americans or all people of color. 2 months later, the city of Birmingham wiped segregation laws clean off the books. Audrey licked her spoon clean at Newberry's counter like everybody else. Black and white together, like we belong. You can see how things have changed, huh? It's like how we can go today to any ice cream parlor that we want, not dependent of our skin color. And here's a note and a photograph of Audrey, because remember, she is a real child, or at the time was a real child, and this is a true story of how she protested for equal rights for all African Americans. I hope you liked that story. It was a little bit long, but I think it's an important story to remember the civil rights movement and how things used to be and how things have changed today, and thinking about also what things can still change for us all to be treated equally and fairly. I will read to you all soon. Bye!